Hello, I think we're live. Chris, can I confirm that you can see the live stream on YouTube? Yes, I am live. Okay. Well, my other window. Awesome. Well, it wouldn't be an A11y Bytes for anyone who has been to one of these events before without a tech hiccup. We have had all sorts of things happen over the 9 years that we have now been doing A11y Bytes events. So for some of you, this would probably be very familiar, but we're only 1 or 2 minutes late, and I want to welcome you to A11y Bytes 2021 and wish you a very happy Global Accessibility Awareness Day. I want to start by acknowledging that I am hosting this event from the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you all join from today, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Well, happy GAD. I am joined today by many of our wonderful presenters. So as you would have seen, we have actually been, sorry, I think I need to turn on live streaming. Sorry, actually. Come back to that in a sec. Chris, can you see the captions? On YouTube? Yes, good. Lovely. Sorry about that. So yes, as you would have seen today, we have been releasing our 11 presentations from our wonderful presenters who have spent the time to record their sessions beforehand and share what they're passionate about around accessibility. And today I am joined by a number of those presenters for our live Q&A session. So my name is Sarah. I always forget to introduce myself. I am founder of A11y Bytes and love sort of doing this and running events. So I'd like to start by asking each of our presenters on the line to give a short introduction. I've asked them to introduce themselves, tell us what they spoke about in their presentation, and what are 3 sort of key takeaways that they hope people walked away with when they watched their presentation. So I might start with you, Mark.
Perfect. Hi there, I'm Mark Stedman. I work for DQ Systems in the United States. We're an accessibility company. I did the presentation on accessibility testing in JavaScript frameworks. I know, extremely specific on it, but at DQ Systems, my job is actually working with development teams to actually set up automation testing like I did in my presentation. I also work to help developers remediate accessibility issues and also do training for developers on accessibility in general, because the development community is one that's really kind of blind to the fact of accessibility in general. So we like to bring awareness to them and actually bring it forward to them as well, what accessibility is and helping them fix the accessibility issues within their application. 3 things to take away from my presentation today. Use AXScore when you can within your unit testing. That's a big thing. I know it only gets you up to around 50% from an automated perspective, but again, getting that baseline accessible application is fantastic. Another one is ensure all your content is tested at multiple levels. So if you're using JavaScript frameworks, make sure that your content is tested both at a component level and at an integration level as well. The last one is just continue to evolve and set standards for testing. The best thing you can do with automated testing is get developers aware of accessibility and get them to like it, just like I did. That's actually my story. I actually used AXScore in a project and I started to get accessibility, started accessibility aware, and I'm here now. So yeah, nice to meet everybody.
Lovely, Mark. And I have the sticker of the t-shirt that you have on. Tell everyone what your t-shirt is.
Absolutely. It's got a coding bracket and it says, "Friends don't let friends ship inaccessible code." It is like my favorite t-shirt to present in of all time.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. We might move on to you, Rhiannon.
Sure. So my name's Rhiannon Hall. I'm a content officer at the Alex Lab at the University of Technology, Sydney. The LX Lab is a support service for academics at the university. We support academics in all things learning and teaching, and accessibility is obviously a really important part of that. And I'm here presenting with my colleague, Katie Duncan. So I might pass on to her, and she can introduce herself and also talk a little bit about our project that we're presenting.
Perfect. Over to you, Katie.
As Rhiannon said, I work in the LX Lab at the University of Technology, Sydney. I'm the LX Lab Inclusive Practices Coordinator, so really focusing on helping academics make their learning environments accessible and inclusive. The project that we talked about is Students Explain Digital Accessibility, where we co-designed videos with students with lived experience of disability to help academics understand the importance of accessibility. And it provided, so a couple of the key takeaways from the presentation is that they were meant to be practical tips that the academics could take away and actually, I suppose, have big impact and achievable results in their content. It was really important for us to do it with the students' perspective, particularly with those with lived experience. And that it was really important to create a collaborative and comfortable environment in order to co-design with the students so they felt comfortable kind of discussing their experiences. Thanks.
Lovely. Thank you, Katie. Michael.
Hi everyone, I'm Michael Osborne from a company called Upskill Digital here in the United Kingdom. Upskill Digital, they do some fantastic things on diversity and inclusion, particularly for Black and minority ethnicities and the trans community. And I'm about a month into the role, and I'm really looking forward to spearheading the initiative on the accessibility front as well, because it's one of the missing pieces and I'd love to see it more. From a personal perspective, I'm all about accessibility in learning. So that was what my presentation was about, digital accessibility in a learning context. And I've spoken since early last year at various conferences like Learning Solutions and Learning Technologies on actionable tips that people can actually use and implement to make their learning more accessible. The three things I hope people took from my session are accommodating opposite needs. So whilst having like having text content on the screen, audio narrated, for example, might be beneficial to the people with low literacy or with visual impairments. It's not great to the vast majority of learners. I also wanted people to think about the quizzes and how they design the navigation of their content so that it's accessible using a keyboard. And also if you have any fine motor skills, so like clicking radio buttons, we need to make that selection area bigger. And finally, looking at videos, captions, and audio descriptions. So trying to have those on by default is a great start, particularly if you're doing any live sessions. And what I love about the live captioning side of things is it forces proper design. So it helps you articulate slowly, speak clearly, because if you're using live captioning software, as many of us probably have today, that certainly helps.
Lovely. Thank you, Michael. Vidya.
Hello, everyone. Happy GAD. My name is Vidya Vijaykumar. I'm the Digital Accessibility Specialist from Visibility here in Western Australia. I wear several hats. I'm in charge of converting and producing materials in various accessible formats, including EPUB, print, and audio. I look after the production of accessible talking books as well for our library here, and also provide various accessible consultancy for government organizations and companies to ensure everything is accessible, from website, videos, podcasts to documents, and it meets the accessibility standards. My presentation was on how to make your videos accessible and inclusive for everyone. So similar to what Michael has just mentioned, a couple of key takeaways I hope people have taken away from my presentation is understanding why it's important to create accessible videos and what are the key components that relates to creating accessible videos. So that includes captioning, audio description, and a transcript file. And also a couple of the quick tips that I have provided as well in terms of how they can implement these components. Thank
Lovely.
you.
Thanks, Vidya. So we did have a bit of a theme this year on accessible videos, and I'll actually ask Ben to introduce himself because he did a deep dive into some of the things that both Vidya and Michael mentioned in their presentations.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. My name is Ben Moxie. For those of you who can't see the screen, I like to think of myself fairly young, 41-year-old male, pretty pale skin. I'm in a pretty boring environment here, home office. All you can pretty well see is shutters behind me. And I don't have a nice catchy shirt like Mark does. It's just a pretty plain white shirt with a couple of blue dots on it, I think. I can't even remember. So I am totally blind myself. And as many of you who saw the presentation, it was called Audio Description in a Pinch. I'm not Jodie Martin. So that's the person who presented that. She's my boss, that you've got me here today. So I guess I work at Guide Dogs as an access and technology advisor. I've had a pretty long career in teaching people blindness related assistive technology, all the different screen readers and so on. And recently I'm just been right into that access and technology world, which is what I love with a passion. I guess the three takeaways we wanted to make, I should keep it short and sweet. So the first is we all know how extremely important captioning is, and we'd love to see it get to a stage where audio description is considered just as important. Okay, so you're giving people the visual stuff that they're missing out on in an audible form. Second thing there is, well, I'll give everyone a really quick tip. This is how it's a great way to work out whether your video is accessible. Just sit down and watch it through without the visual and really think about, do you know what's happening on screen? Would you be able to get away with watching that without seeing it at all, like when I watch the television, and know what's actually happening? And the third thing of all is planning. So it's, if you take the time to think about what you're about to put together, video presentation or whatever it might be, ensure that you sit down, you look at your script, you make sure you've got appropriate pauses in there so you can put that audio description in the future if you need to, and it just goes in there nice and seamlessly. And don't forget the importance of informal audio description. So, you know, a really good example is even just, I know it was pretty basic today, but when I introduce myself, I think it's a nice idea, give people a bit of context of what, you know, the environment you're in, just in case they can't see the screen. So thanks, everyone. It's great to be here.
Thank you, Ben. Over to you, Gian.
Hi, thanks, Sarah. This is great. It's fantastic that's been going on for so long. My name's Gian. I'm the CEO of Accessibility Oz. I've been in accessibility a long time. Accessibility Oz just celebrated its 10-year anniversary. I spent some time with the W3C contributing to WCAG 2, but more recently I've been focusing on mobile accessibility guidelines because mobile accessibility has been a big thing that, you know, the W3C and WCAG has kind of been a bit slow to include. So my presentation was on the mobile accessibility guidelines that we developed in conjunction with a number of different accessibility consultancies, including DQ. So that was released in late 2019. We were going to review it again in 2020, but of course COVID happened and things didn't really get off to a very good start. So we are looking to re-release these guidelines quite regularly. So, you know, once a year we're looking to reform the committee to update these guidelines as things change. And so the guidelines are available on Accessibility Oz, but they're also available on the ICT Accessibility Testing Symposium website, which is where we initially convened. And basically there's a section on mobile site accessibility, and then the other section is on native app accessibility. So well, the first thing I'd like you to take away is that there are mobile accessibility testing guidelines out there. WCAG is really not sufficient. Certainly WCAG 3, also known as Silver, is going to be much better, but that's a few years away. 2.1, WCAG 2.1 really didn't include a lot of things that a lot of the accessibility industry was asking for in terms of mobile accessibility. And 2.2 is kind of the same, though of course you know, it's quite new. So The other thing I'd like you to take away is that you should always test with actual devices. Really don't test with simulators. I spent a lot of time speaking at conferences, tearing mobile sites apart. And I can tell you that 90% of the mobile sites that I showed that had big problems were down to the fact that people had used simulators instead of actual devices. So, get your hands on some devices, and you don't need to get your hands on a huge number of devices. Like, really, there's just, iOS and Android out there, an iPhone and Android phone, iPhone, an iPad and Android tablet, and you're pretty good to go. So absolutely use devices. The other thing that I'd like to emphasize is that when you're testing native app accessibility, because it's much harder to get to the code and there's a whole lot fewer ways to actually test native apps, you really need to test with the inbuilt assistive technologies. And we're not just talking about screen readers like VoiceOver and TalkBack and things like that, but you'll find that with native apps that people are using a whole bunch of assistive technologies that they would never consider using on desktop. So increasing text size, inverting colors, using dark mode, using voice to text, all those kind of things people use, they would never identify as having a disability, but they're still using them. And so if your native app crashes and burns when you've got that kind of assistive technology or feature implemented, then they're not going to be able to use your system. So that's the other thing that I'd like to emphasize. And the last thing is always use native UI. So use your native Apple elements, native Android elements. Do not create your own JavaScript widget. You can make a native UI element look how you want it to look, but as soon as you start creating your own widgets, you have to create all the accessibility that goes with them. And I can tell you that I have not yet come across anyone that's able to actually do that. So really just there's select boxes there for a reason, there's radio buttons there for a reason. Make them look however you like, but always have the underlying code as the native element. So yes, that's me.
Lovely, thank you, Gian. And Neil. Oh, Neil, you're back on mute.
Okay.
That's looking better.
Do you know it does that sometimes? It toggles when you've... Anyway. Hello, everybody. My name is Neil Jarvis. I did the presentation on EPUB 3. I'm really, really delighted to say that I think as one of our other colleagues earlier, I've been in my current role for a month now, and that's with Intopia, which is a digital accessibility organization. And before then, I worked quite extensively for some years in the field of inclusive publishing, and that's why I was keen to do a presentation on EPUB 3 and the importance of it. I talk in the presentation about how it's really important to recognize that this is an idea whose time has come. We've been talking about EPUB 3 in the industry for a long time now, but it was hard to produce if you weren't a professional producer, and it was also hard to get sufficient reading devices to read EPUB 3 documents on. That is changing rapidly now, and as far as production is concerned, with the onset of the Word to EPUB 3 converter, which the DAISY Consortium brought out in 2020, that's pretty much completed the jigsaw, really. Most of the major systems that people use, be that Office, be that Libra, be that InDesign, and many others, they're now capable of themselves producing pretty decent EPUB 3 output. So it's become much easier to get onto the EPUB 3 platform, and the barrier to entry really is much lower than it ever has been. So my three things that I would like people to take out of it are that the time has come. EPUB 3 is now a significant and mature digital publishing format. Secondly, that it's been adopted widely by big, heavy players in the publishing field, not just in the disability field, but in the mainstream field, especially, in fact, in the mainstream field. And thirdly, it's time for everybody else to join in. Doesn't matter whether you're a publisher in traditional terms, or whether you are a government department wishing to put out information about your services or your or information for your citizens. EPUB 3 is a natural format to produce in, and it's time that more and more organizations are doing it. So get on board.
Awesome, thank you, Neil. And usually at A11y Bytes, I am only the moderator, but this year I wanted to maybe give a brief glimpse into what's coming in WCAG 2.2. So I kind of did actually put my hand up for a presentation. So I guess, you know, key takeaways, obviously we're getting a little bit of an insight into 2.2 before it's officially released in September, fingers crossed. I know it's been delayed by about 3 months now, but I reckon we're probably pretty close to seeing it. So it's always nice to have a look at what is coming. And I guess, you know, there are some organizations that do focus on WCAG as kind of, you know, what they want to do in terms of an accessible experience. But for me, I actually like seeing the development of the actual new success criteria and looking at its intent. We shouldn't have to wait for these criteria to be ready. There's already some amazing and great recommendations within there that we could be implementing now, or maybe organizations actually have already been implementing. So I really just wanted to give a little bit of an insight on, you know, what's on the horizon for 2.2. Now, so we have already had a few questions through YouTube, which I can see popping up here. For anyone else, though, please start sending through your questions. We'll get started with the few that have come through already. But if you've got any questions for individual panelists based on their presentation, please send them through. Or if you do have more general accessibility related questions, I'm sure we've got a wealth of experience here and lots of opinions. So that's good too. So we're going to start with our first question from Chris. And it's kind of fitting considering we have people from Australia, New Zealand, the US and the UK on the line. And this question is, how do we bring, and this is the Australian Disability Discrimination Act, into the 21st century? Should we be shaming our act in relation to Section 508 and the EU success? Not a loaded question there at all to start with. Did anyone have any thoughts that they wanted to kick off with? Feel free to just take yourself off mute.
Yeah, I actually, the Disability Discrimination Act in Australia is very different to in the US. In the US, they require everything to be accessible, whereas the disability, and they have very specific requirements under Section 508, whereas in Australia, we have this thing called the Disability Discrimination Act, which actually doesn't require that you meet WCAG. It actually requires that you don't discriminate against people with disabilities. And it recommends that the way that you do that is WCAG. And it also makes it very clear that that if there are judgments against people regarding inaccessibility, those judgments, those financial judgments, will be in relation to the amount of harm it may have caused someone to not have an accessible website. And so this is why we've seen in Australia not a lot of legislation, but not a lot of litigation, but also you know, not as much as litigation as US, but we will see that change as in the next 5 to 10 years, as a whole lot more services and products are provided solely online, because you will get to a point where, you know, someone who has, you know, a serious medical condition can't see their doctor because they can't, you know, book an online appointment, or someone can't get their prescription meds because they can't use an online system. And so that is going to trigger a whole lot more litigation in Australia. So I think that that's something where things will change. So I know Australia has been very, you know, small in terms of litigation, but, you know, I really think that's going to change in the next 5 to 10 years.
Thank you, Gian. Anyone else want to provide some insight?
I can from the United States perspective. So Section 508 in the US, kind of playing off of what's just said there, we have some litigation that comes back to 508. The problem in the US with 508 is it's now the mapping to WCAG 2 OAA. So some of the litigation is tied to that. And so when we've worked with government entities or have talked to people who work in government entities, they get a little bit confused of, okay, are we 508 or are we WCAG 2 double O or 2 OAA, right? So from over here, we've got litigation that's come through that's basically said, hey, 2 OAA is going to be the standard. That's confused a few entities, especially from like a government side of things. So Section 508 mapping to 2, a lot of times when we talk to anybody in government, they're like, well, does this map to 2 or are we on the hook for 508? And it's really kind of a mixture of both. So it can throw people off in the US from that standpoint. But I think it does help because WCAG in general has a lot more backing, there's a lot more resources for it. So when people within government entities start looking for 508 stuff and they see it maps to WCAG 2 now, there's a lot more resources for them to help out. Whereas in the past in the US, it's been, okay, help us, right? Like we don't even know where to start with this. So it's a little bit, in flux over here, but in general, that mapping to WCAG 2 does help from a litigation standpoint over there too.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because the upside, look, I have often called the Disability Discrimination Act a bit of a toothless tiger. It doesn't have a lot of weight behind it. And I think that's where its biggest shortcoming is at the moment. The flip side is that there is a difference between what we often call technical accessibility and conforming with WCAG versus something that is usable accessible. So on one hand, I'm kind of glad that we're not just focusing on WCAG as the measure, let's say, of something being accessible or someone, being able to access content. So I think that's a little bit in its favor to not have it written in. The other thing that people may not be aware of is, Mark, you mentioned Section 508, and it is a predominantly government standard, although many others will still reference it outside of government. In Australia, certainly at a federal level, people are actually required when they're purchasing software to meet EN 301549, which is the European procurement standard. So here in Australia, its designation is AS EN 301549 because it's been adopted by Standards Australia. So we do have some equivalents. It's more about how well they're, I guess, serving the community and what they need to do. And that's where I think things are falling down. Fantastic. So on to our next question. A question from Bayside City Council. Are there resources for how to write good closed captions? Now, I know some of you have already popped into chat 2 resources. So the BBC Accessibility Guideline resources around subtitling and also the W3C's one around captions. So we've already got 2 that I'm guessing Chris has probably already shot out through YouTube. Are there any other resources that anyone on the line could think of to sort of, I guess, help with how to write good captions?
We have something called the Accessibility Fact Sheets. It's on the Accessibility Oz website. There is a video fact sheet, and that fact sheet has a section on how to write, descriptive, accurate captions, as well as audio descriptions and transcripts. And they're available under Creative Commons. So if you want to grab them and use them in your own, organization accessibility stuff, you're welcome to do so. I'll put that URL in the chat as well.
Thank you. I know actually I read an article recently by Meryl Evans, which I can dig up the link for. It was a really insightful article. I think it was 6 tips around captioning. And it was, definitely things that I like, almost getting into that really nitty-gritty things that were quite new to me and tips that I hadn't necessarily come across before. So I'll call that one out and yeah, try find a link and share that a bit later.
Sorry, Sarah, can I also add social media? I think recently Instagram stories have released auto captioning as well. So now you can upload your videos on Instagram stories and it does the auto captioning. Obviously it's not accurate, but it gives the capability for you to go and correct your captioning. So that is a really nice add-on, and can see Instagram is making a lot of changes from their end. And also they have an Hootsuite. It's a company where where you can get a subscription to organize your social media content. They've got some good captioning tips as well on how you can write for Instagram and your social media posts. So that's something that people can go and look up as well, mostly for content creators who are looking after their social media outlets.
Thank you. Right, we have a question for Neil from Zoe. You said no matter where you come from or work, get on board. What strategies can you share about eliciting engagement from organisations? Oh, and you don't think it. There we go.
There we go. There we go. So I guess the important thing is to really spread the message to those that need to hear it within organizations that EPUB 3 is now, like I said before, a mature format, mature platform that is ready to be used. Often people are used to using what they're used to using. So they've used PDF for a long time or other formats. And there's not always anything wrong with those other than the fact that they're not best suited to accessibility, and they're not best suited to working on the wide range of devices that people are using nowadays, whereas EPUB 3 is. So I think it's really a question of talking with organizations that maybe are interested, but they don't know where to start. Well, point them towards something like the Word to EPUB converter as a starting point, but also really explaining why it matters. And it matters because for years and years and years, we are used to waiting for books in particular to be transcribed into alternate formats, and that, through no fault of the transcriber, can take weeks, months, and be very expensive. It can cost as much to produce an alternate format as it did to publish the original book in print. Well, that therefore makes scarcity the issue. So we've worked really hard in the last few years to bring about the Marrakesh Treaty, which enables the easier exchange of content across international borders. But that still requires, wonderful as that is, and I spent a lot of my life in the last 10 years advocating for that, and I'm a big believer in the treaty. But the treaty still relies on organizations producing accessible formats. What EPUB 3 can do is help you to create a publication that's born accessible, doesn't require that remediation. So I think selling the advantages is the strategy that needs to be done. A lot of talking and a lot of negotiating, but I really think it's the way forward. And it's interesting that more and more of the organizations that are involved in transcription are also working in EPUB 3 because it is a sensible workflow for them.
Lovely. Thanks, Neil.
Sorry, Neil. Sarah, I keep interrupting.
No, go ahead. Actually, Zoe would love any feedback from anyone else on the panel on this question too. That's just come through. So absolutely.
Neil, I was very excited to listen to your presentation because I'm a huge fan of EPUB 3. And I agree. I think it's just changing people's mindset as well in terms of accepting that EPUB 3 is the future format, and that people have stuck to producing PDF documents for so long.
Yeah.
And also knowing the capabilities of EPUB and, being able to include everything in that one format, with including videos and videos with captioning and audio description is just that one step further of using it as a universal format. So yeah, thank you for your presentation.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Wonderful. I think sometimes when you're looking at organizations adopting something new, it's awareness is one thing, but it's how do you make it easy?
Yeah.
So, what are, like, if you have tried, why isn't it succeeding? Is it that maybe people aren't familiar with a publishing tool? Although from what Neil says, most people are pretty familiar with Word to PDF, so Word to EPUB is not a huge stretch, but that could be another thing to try to look at. So I wanted to actually direct the next question to Katie and Rhiannon. So I was really excited about your mention and use of the co-design process to actually create your videos. And it's something that I'd love to see more of in all different things that we, sort of do. What would be your tips for individuals or organizations wanting to do more co-design?
I'll pass this on to Katie in a second. It's always a bit difficult when you're juggling between two.
No worries.
But I think for us, it was certainly for me, my impression was that taking the time to establish an environment where everybody feels welcome, feels comfortable, and is able to, express themselves honestly was a really important part of it. I think a few of the students that we worked with talked about the importance of community as well. They're a group of people with lived experience working together. So I think that was another part of it that kind of, produced some magic in the room. Katie, would you like to share some of your impressions?
Yeah, I think one of the other things that I think is really important is to kind of build that comfort, but also make sure that you're doing it in a supported way. So making sure that you're not just kind of throwing people in a room, but making sure that you have a framework so you can scaffold the process. Because I think if you, as the person running the co-design workshop, you're still needing to lead it and you're still needing to have a plan for it. And I think if you just kind of ran a collaborative session without kind of having that plan and thought, then you can put your participants, they might not be at ease. So I think having a real plan and just a way to scaffold in through the process is really important.
And something I'd mention as well is that, especially we're working with students, and they're all fantastic, and but they're people at the beginning of their careers, and they brought so much to the project. We learned a lot from them, but hopefully we were also able to give them a new experience as well. And I think that's something to remember when you're working with students is, like Katie said, having that structure and that scaffolding and the guidance is going to be really important.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Michael, so you talked about accessible e-learning. A lot of organizations I know that particularly have to create lots and lots of e-learning use tools to create their modules. And of course, how accessible a module is often dictated by whether the tool can actually produce accessible content. Are there any particular tools or tips that you have for people around that?
One of them would be, as we touched upon earlier, was stick to the built-in templates rather than like custom modules, because whether it's something like a author-owned package like Microsoft Word or something like a articulate storyline, quite often those basic templates are set up in a way that works to start with. So the headings are set up correctly and the body content is set up correctly. So if you're testing things with like keyboard navigation, it's a great way, rather than sort of inserting text boxes here and inserting text boxes there and images. But as soon as you start inserting custom content that's not fitting into that placeholder framework, you need to start thinking about things like the tab order. So the more you can first of all, research the tool and put pressure on them. But most tools now will say what accessibility aspects they can use, and try to work within those rather and always do it at outset. You know, if you try to fix things later, you're going to cause yourself problems both in time and cost.
Absolutely. Thanks, Michael. So we have a question from Chris for everyone. What are your favorites? So what, I'd say that's probably favorite like websites. What's a good end user experience and why?
I'm happy to jump in once again. I know I've already just spoken, but one of my favorite websites for accessibility, particularly in a learning context, is actually not a e-learning specific one. It's the game accessibility guidelines. So if you check those out, if you're designing learning content, because quite a lot of suppliers these days or vendors like to activate things like gamification, there's a number of things from, you know, like time sequences and things like that, which you need to think about. And what the game accessibility guidelines do is it arranges it by type of impairment. It gives you the level of difficulty, and furthermore, it allows you to gives you some examples. So what not to do and what actually to do. So you can drill down on multiple levels. So definitely go check that out.
Lovely. Thank you, Michael. Anyone else? Anything, any particular websites, apps, experiences that you know that produce a good end user experience? Wow, we mustn't be doing well if no one can. If we have nothing.
Sarah, I'd put in a plug for the Radio New Zealand website, which is quite good, and that is primarily because back in the day, the lead developer for the website was an absolute passionate advocate of web accessibility. And although he's no longer part of the outfit there, his legacy has most definitely lived on. And it may not be perfect, but it's pretty good and very navigable. There's a lot of information on there which is easy to find and easy to get your way around. So rnz.co.nz is a good one to try out.
I've been playing some computer games lately, like iPhone games, and I was really impressed to find that this game, which uses a lot of colors and things like that, actually has a colorblind friendly mode. And I must say, I'm sure that it's completely inaccessible in a whole bunch of different ways, but I'm really, really impressed that it's kind of become a bit more mainstream, that, you know, a kind of common or popular iPhone game would actually even consider something like this, as opposed to, well, you know, it's reliant on colors, so if you're colorblind, you can't use it. So I was really impressed to see that. But yeah, unfortunately, we're still a long way away from, you know, getting to points where we're really happy with things, unfortunately.
I'd just add on to what Michael and Diana have said. I think looking to the video games industry is a really good place to find more information about accessibility, because it is taking off so much, and because there's more opportunities for audiences to be vocal about what their accessibility requirements are. So this is not so much about the end user experience, but there's a website I've learned a lot from is called a website called Can I Play That? And that features accessibility focused reviews by disabled gamers. And yeah, even though I'm working in a very different field, I've learned a lot by reading the reviews on that site.
I think I'll jump in as well to give my views. Probably not so much, I guess you can say it's a little bit of both of an end user and just taking out the perspective of people's view about accessibility in general. So there's a company called Key2. They are based here in Western Australia, and they've taken a lot of effort in ensuring that the websites that they're producing is accessible. They have played a huge role as well in developing our website, but we've worked closely with them in identifying what are the key accessibility issues and what is it that needs to be fixed. So they have taken that on board, and they were open to suggestions as well in terms of, okay, what is it that they can change, and they've done very, very well. And now that they've started implementing that for future projects as well. So a huge kudos to Key2 Creatives from Western Australia. And the other one as well is, I'm trying to remember what's the name of the website. But this particular website focuses on three-dimensional soundscapes. So just to give people an idea of what is it like to step into the shoes of someone who's got no vision and they rely completely on their hearing. So I'm a bit of a sound geek. So outside of work, I specialize in three-dimensional audio, primarily focusing on 3D binaural audio. So I've created a couple of soundscape based on this particular sound designer and how he has put together these different type of soundscapes, but not so much focusing on two-dimensional. So that's hearing just, your left and right stereo channels, but, you experiencing as though you are there at that particular time. So, yeah.
Lovely. Thanks, Vidya. So Ben, I'd love to ask you a little bit more about audio description. And in particular, I guess, you mentioned when you introduced yourself, you sort of described yourself a bit and what have you. What are some other tips you can give us in terms of, and it doesn't just have to be pre-recorded audio, but even if we're in, situations like this, what are some of the things that you would suggest people do that maybe you see them don't, not describe, let's say?
There's some really simple ones, Sarah. So even you'll be in meetings and people like this, so we're all very familiar with Zoom nowadays, but people will hold up some sort of an object and they're demonstrating it during the meeting and they don't mention what it is or give any description of what it looks like. So I guess the main thing is a lot of the time it is common sense, because I bet there's probably a lot of people sitting here thinking about this now going, oh yeah, that's really simple. It's something I've never really thought of doing. And we genuinely believe that people aren't doing this deliberately. It's just something that's there's probably not a lot of awareness out there. And we're hoping our video might help that. But yeah, basically just common sense things. If you're going to show something on screen or display something in your presentation, then give a bit of a quick rundown of what it looks like and what you're displaying on screen.
Lovely, thanks, Ben. So we have a question from Addie. Has anyone had experience working with designers to help them consider the user experience for accessibility users or people with accessibility needs? So things like different interaction methods, keyboards, screen readers, that kind of thing.
Yeah, we've got a design workshop in which we specifically cover design accessibility, and it's it's not just use of colors, but it's use of placement of elements, and also one of the important things that we cover a lot in the mobile guidelines is indicating functionality. So that's something that people don't really realize on mobile devices, is that with a desktop you can move your mouse over something and it changes, the cursor changes, and therefore you realize that it's active, but that's not something that you can convey on a mobile device. So indicating that there's additional functionality, whereas, if that's swiping across something or, double tapping or whatever it is, indicating that functionality is a really important thing that has to be covered in design. So yeah, there's a number of different things that, that designers can cover, and it's a lot more than just color contrast.
Sarah, can I just add on to what Gian has just mentioned? Great response, Gian. So the other thing that I've noticed as well working with designers is recording the user experience. That's something that has helped a lot, because sometimes when you try to pack so much in a report, it just doesn't make any sense. And what we have started doing here is whenever we conduct user testing is we just start recording exactly what the end user is experiencing, and then having them have the designers watch to show them, okay, this is why, something's not working because, you've not labeled your forms, or your links are not descriptive, or, your color contrast is so poor to a point that, users are unable to read. So yeah, just, having, just record the user experience and sharing that with the designers is definitely something to consider as well.
Wonderful.
Can I
So
jump
actually,
on that, Sarah?
yeah,
please?
absolutely.
Everyone, it's Ben again. And I just wanted to emphasize how important that point was then, because I know one thing that I often do here, I notice there's definitely a bit of a disconnect between this. We've got some great designers out there who do have an understanding of accessibility, but from a blindness perspective, they don't have a very good understanding of how to use screen reader technology to test it. So that's one thing that we always do here when provide their feedback in some sort of a report, of course. But generally what I'll do is invite the developers to come forward, build a rapport, and actually do a live demonstration. So get on there with whatever screen reader they choose to use. We'll demonstrate the mainstream one so they can see how it all unfolds. Because I think it's really important to that someone shouldn't have to be an expert screen reader user just to be able to access a website. So a lot of that sort of stuff, it becomes really clear when they see you go through it. And I can say, although this might be technically accessible, you can see how difficult this is to access for somebody, particularly if they don't know their screen reader back to front, and somebody shouldn't have to access a website. So anyway, I just thought it was a really important point to jump onto. I totally back that.
Absolutely.
Yes, I would agree with that. In fact, it was a point I made in a presentation earlier on today, that it's really important that your user group is not a user group of experts, because that's not what the world's full of. The world's full of people with a very wide range of skills. So really important to get that wide range of skills represented. And I know that here at Intopia, we do a lot of work with developers and designers, both in terms of usability audits and also tailored training courses aimed at those particular roles. But also, my own experience in the past is whenever you get some designers or developers into a room with a bunch of testers, you always get the light bulb moment. You always have that experience when they just get to understand what it is that didn't work and why. And it's almost life-changing for them, because they will have never seen that before. And when they do, it really is quite an event for them. And so I would totally back that idea that it's really important to get designers and developers in with ordinary testers and give them a chance to see what it's really like. They'll thank you for it.
Wonderful, thank you. I just wanted to add, because I do quite a lot of work with designers. So my colleague Claire and I actually just did a presentation yesterday, and what we were talking about is using annotations on your wireframes or visual designs. So in addition to, I guess, thinking about your design from all those different perspectives, whether it be keyboard interaction or screen reader interaction or that kind of thing, one of those parts, even if you do it really well, is making sure that you pass that knowledge on to the developers. So if you've done lots of work on what's your heading structure or what's your keyboard focus or content focus, it doesn't stop there. It's making sure that there's then that common understanding with devs. And so Claire's actually been working on some annotations. It's not a new concept, but we're iterating on a few annotation packages out there in Figma to develop ways that you can actually communicate that information and have that common understanding, but also that communication channel between your design, dev, test, and whoever else is at the table. Okay, question from actually Claire, same Claire I was talking about. She would love, and I'm conscious we've got just a few minutes, so we might want to keep this one short. Would love to hear your top tips or top number one tip actually for people who are new to accessibility. So keep it in one sentence.
I've got one, which is basically research. Yeah, one word, one tip,
hey!
research.
Well done.
Mine would be just start somewhere. It doesn't matter what you do, just do something, because whatever you do is going to make a big difference.
Yeah, baby steps. So don't feel too overwhelmed when you're first beginning, because it is a complicated area. And yeah, as Michael said, it's just best to start somewhere.
I would say join meetup groups, accessibility meetup groups. I think that's a good starting point, and take it from there. And you'll learn a lot from different accessibility experts. I think we've got a few here in WA and just all across the world. So yeah.
I got quick advice.
Oh, sorry, you go,
I'm
Mark.
sorry. For any web developer, seriously, I'm a huge advocate for it. Use something like Axcore automation-wise, right? I'm living proof. That's what I started with. I used it every single day in a build process, and that's how I got into accessibility. That's how I learned it, right? Yes, it only gets you halfway, but at least you're having those conversations with people about accessibility day to day in the development process. So we're making developers aware of accessibility issues early. So if you can, use something like Axcore or any open source library within your actual build process day to day.
Lovely. Rhiannon?
I'm a content person, so I would say seek out content by people with disabilities. There's tons of it now. There's YouTube channels, there's websites, books, it's everywhere. Go for that content. You'll learn from a lot of diverse perspectives.
I would say all of the above, but also just remember, you never know really who your audience is. You know some of your audience, you never know all of your audience. So step back and just try to imagine that there are probably people who don't use a computer or a mobile phone or a tablet or whatever it happens to be in the way that you do. And just remember that before you do anything else.
Lovely.
Sarah, can I jump in quickly?
Yes.
Great, it's everyone. It's Ben again. My quick tip, I guess, would be you're working with someone who's new to accessibility. Really take the time to engage, build rapport, and give respectful feedback. I think it's just it's a great way to get someone on board. You know, as opposed to you find something that's not working well or isn't accessible, and you jump down someone's throat. I mean, I guess it goes without saying, but it's definitely the best approach.
Lovely. And I'm going to wrap up with celebrate the wins. Sometimes with accessibility, we get so bogged down in all the things we still have to do that we don't actually celebrate when we're actually taking those steps towards being more inclusive. Well, we are at time, and unfortunately we did have one more question. We might be able to slip it in because it's a two-word question. It's what two words would you use to describe the current state of accessibility? That one's a bit harder, is it?
Improving slowly.
You put the
Yeah, I second that.
Me too.
Yeah, I would say definitely improving. My mind automatically jumps to the freely available, very good quality screen readers now. Now, sorry, everyone, I know this is coming from a blindness perspective again, but you know, there was a time when you had to pay $2,000 to get a commercial screen reader to use a Windows computer, and it's not the case anymore. So it's definitely, we're seeing some great advancements, and it's wonderful to see.
I guess just adding on to Ben's comment as well. Sorry, Vidya here, Ben. Also with how much screen readers have developed. I mean, even it was yesterday that my colleague was showing me all the cool stuff that JAWS can do. And I'm like, whoa, even we can't do that on a daily basis. As in, I can't do that on a daily basis. So it's just, you know, the advancement of screen readers, and it will definitely take us places.
Lovely. Okay. I think for me, it would be growing. And I think that's because it's growing in interest. There are a lot more organizations trying to do this. They are starting from a low base, but they are actually focusing on it. So that's probably the improving slowly falls into that. But yeah, I'm heartened to see that, you know, how many more individuals and organizations are paying attention to accessibility. Well, I think that's a wrap. First of all, I wanted to thank all the presenters, both the ones here and also the few that couldn't make it today, for the time that you've taken to share your knowledge, to record your presentations for us. It is really much appreciated on a day where, it's all about, growing and sharing knowledge around accessibility. So thank you all so much. I would also like to, as I called him earlier on the session, my partner in crime, Chris. So for those who've been tuning in on the YouTube channel, he has been fielding the questions, also sharing some of the things that the panelists here have been sharing, and of course doing a lot of the background work in terms of the preparation, getting the videos ready, all of that kind of thing. So big shout out to him, and he's been involved with A11y Bytes from the start as well. So thank you all so much. Have a wonderful Global Accessibility Awareness Day. Keep tuning in to all those lovely events that are on the Twitter conversations and that kind of thing. We do have the Slack channel, so if you do want to continue the conversation, jump on there. We've got a Bytes 2021 channel where you can continue having a chat or sharing anything that you might find of interest. And in that note, have a wonderful day. I was going to say evening, but we're all over the place. So have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yes.
Thank you.